So, hello and welcome to the US Web Design System monthly call for August of 2019. Beautiful summer month. A weird third Thursday for August that comes so quickly on August 15th. But thanks for being here. Today, I got a couple things to talk about, a couple things to announce around the design system, and then I'd like to try to do a bit of demoing around bootstrapping with the design system and how you can add the design system to a project and then begin to work with it. So I'm going to have a few project updates, doing some bootstrapping with USWDS. And then if all goes well, we should have some time for Q&A at the end. So without any further ado, some project updates. A couple notes about Public Sans. We spoke last month about our intention to begin to get Public Sans available in Google Fonts by August, and we are making progress. It is not quite there yet, but we are just about ready to release version 1.007 pretty soon, hopefully within the next week. So that's almost there. And when that releases, there are a couple things that are of note with the new release of Public Sans. So there's a sort of a more reliable spacing for tabular figures. So tabular figures are monospaced numbers that are useful for data design, and now all the tabular figures are they really do have the same width, and that width is the same regardless of the weight of the face or the style. So if it's black or bold or light or italic or any version of those, all of the characters will be the right width, and everything will continue to align properly. Thanks to some folks on GitHub who have been really extra focused on making sure that we're not missing anything and we're doing everything properly here with regards to the way Public Sans is working. Speaking to that, additionally, more consistent placement of diacritics. These were pretty good already, but there's just been a little bit more care into just how all of these things are aligning and relating to one another. And a better build script. This isn't really important for the end user of the font, but it's important for us and for anyone who wants to contribute to the development of the font. It's just we're using a tool called FontMake that helps build the font with a little bit more regularity and a lot more robust and reliable build script that will build a font that is more likely to have few to no critical errors when we begin to get it into the Google Fonts submission process. Which is to say that we're working toward the Google Fonts submission process. And I still do expect that this will happen in August. If it doesn't happen in August, it will happen in like the earliest September, but everything is just there. We're waiting to dot some I's and cross some T's on that. So hopefully by the next time we speak, I'll be able to actually produce a Google Slides presentation in Google Slides using Public Sans instead of making rasterized screenshots and pasting them into a Google Slides presentation, which is not the best way to do it. The other big thing, and I think the big thing that is most important to what we're discussing today, is that yesterday we released USWDS 2.1.0. So it's our first minor release after releasing 2.0, and this is an interesting sort of release. Has some good functionality that was initiated by the community. And the big thing that we're releasing in 2.1.0 is this idea of USWDS packages. This is something that will allow you through the mechanism of our SAS import process to import only the components that your project needs. So this is the way you typically import the design system now through SAS. use this directive called import USWDS that goes in and it looks into the source code and it pulls out everything that the design system needs to run. It's all of these components, accordions and alerts and headers and heroes, all the typography styles and font face stuff, utilities. All that stuff is pulled into the big USWDS package. Starting in 2.0, we kind of began to experiment with this idea of packages that didn't really write it up too much, but it was in a little bit of the documentation. It would allow you to import like just the components, or maybe just the font face declarations, or just the utilities. And we've expanded this idea so that now you can import just the components that your project is using. So instead of doing something like @import USWDS, oh, sorry, excuse me. And so the whole package, the whole USWDS package is hefty, 270 minified, 40K zipped. It's a hefty package with a lot of things in there. The intention with the USWDS package always was that that it was meant to be modified, and you were meant to begin to sort of pick and choose what you were using. It comes with utilities baked in, but not all the utilities maybe would be used in the production code. So it was always meant to be minified a bit and meant to be subsetted a bit. But the addition of USWDS packages allows us to do something like just @import USA banner. And when you @import USA banner, it goes in and it looks at all of the code, and it begins to import the things that the banner needs. And this is not just necessarily all of the classes that begin USA banner. There are some things in the banner that the banner uses that are outside, that are unrelated necessarily by code to USA banner. There's some accordion stuff in there, and there's some media blocks in there for displaying images. So the package, the USA banner package now, when you import it, knows to grab all of the dependencies that are required for just the Gov banner. So if you want to use USWDS and you want to use just the Gov banner, you can go through you can generate your SAS and use @import USA banner, or any of the other components, and import just the components that you're using in your project. And this can get you from a place where you're at 270K and 40K zip to a place where you're at under 40K minified and only 5K zipped. So you can potentially see some real reduction in footprint when you begin to use packages, depending on the needs of your project. So every component that we have in the design system now has a package that you can access through SAS imports. And all of these packages and all of their various requirements and how to use them are documented at designsystem.digital.gov/components. And we're going to get into that a little bit as we get into the next part of what we're talking about here, which is bootstrapping with USWDS, or how do you begin to add the design system to a project and begin to work with it? What are the things that are really requirements to begin to work with the design system at all? And to do that, I have brought up this classic demo slide, and I'll see if I can now access the demo once Zoom lets me. Come on, Zoom. Yes. All right. All right, so I have a cool website. And this cool website is a website that I have built with Jekyll. It is 1 page long, and its subject is adding the design system to a project. Right now, my Jekyll project is very, very simple. It's just a sort of raw installation of Jekyll. I have a style sheet that I'm using to style this particular page. And now it can't be reached. And I can go over here to my terminal window, and I'll restart my Jekyll up again. So that's all there. We can see this page the way nature intended it. Yeah, so here's my cool website. And what I'd like to do is, now that I have this rough content here, the intention is now to add the design system to this project, add the design system to this Jekyll project. And there are really two main things to think about when you're thinking about adding the design system to a project. And maybe this is obvious, but you need to get the code and you need to build the code. And there are a number of ways to get the design system code, but the way that we recommend is to grab the code using Node Package Manager or NPM to add the code to a project sort of automatically. And when you use Node and NPM, which I won't super go into right now, it allows you to sort of attach the design system as a dependency of your project. It can allow you to pin it to a particular version, or to keep it up to date with the latest version. And it keeps all of the design system files in a special folder in your project that is subject to updating whenever you want to grab a new version of the design system. And because the files in that folder are subject to updating when you get a new version of the design system, we don't recommend directly editing any of the design system files that are installed by NPM. They install them in this directory called node modules. Because one of the benefits is the ease of upgrade. If you customize any of the files in that folder and then you upgrade your USWDS package in NPM, all of the things that you changed in that folder are going to get overridden and blitzed, and they'll all be gone. So you're going to need a build process that converts those source files that we keep in the node modules folder into CSS and JavaScript files that your web browser can find and read. This demo is only going to focus on looking at the CSS side. We're just going to grab the JavaScript from the package and not worry about adding anything to it or recompiling it. But that could also be a part of your build process as well. But we're only going to focus on the CSS side here. So when you have a project, like our project over here, the way you would add the design system to your project is with something like npm install USWDS. And it would go in and it will talk to the NPM website. It'll grab all the files that we have uploaded to NPM as a design system package, and sort of save them in that folder, and attach some metadata to your document to say that it's using it and it's here. So now that is us grabbing the design system and putting it in this project. So now we have the design system like source, like there in the project. Now we actually have to do something with it. You could grab a precompiled version of the CSS and just plunk it in to your project, and you would technically like have it. But really a lot of the power of the design system comes from modifying the design system and customizing what's there to suit your project needs. And what we provide by default in the compiled style sheets are like a good way to get started, and kind of something that has a little bit for everybody. But because it has a little bit for everybody, it's not really the ideal solution for anybody. So we really recommend pursuing some sort of a workflow where you're building the style sheet from the source code. So we recommend, and what we use internally is we use Gulp to process our Sass into production CSS. There are other ways that you could do it, and other ways can be equally good or even better. But we recommend Gulp because we use it and because we can support a system that uses Gulp. And there are a couple things And essentially what Gulp does is it's a task manager. It like watches files, and when things change, it does other stuff to them. And the main thing what we want it to do with the files that we're thinking about right now is we want it to look for changes in some files, some of our settings files and some of our entry point files. And if there are changes there, we want it to go in and rebuild our CSS from the SAS. And there are a couple of requirements that the design system has when it is building its CSS from source SAS. It needs to use auto prefixing. We have an auto prefixing setup of greater than 2%, last two versions, and IE 11. This adds all of the proper prefixes to the CSS to support all of those spec'd out versions. We don't want folks to have to remember all of the proper vendor prefixes when they're writing CSS or SAS. We want that to all sort of be processed automatically and processed sort of reliably. So we really don't write vendor prefixes into our source, and we depend on a tool like Gulp Auto Prefixer to go in and add all of those vendor prefixes into our code. So when you're doing this on your own, you're going to need to use Auto Prefixer as well, because if you don't, you're gonna spit out some CSS code that is not prefixed appropriately for all of the browsers that the design system is meant to support. So it needs auto prefixing. It also, if you are using utilities, requires this thing called media query packing. And what media query packing does is it collects all similar media queries together at the end of the document. So all the rules without media queries happen, all the rules with media query 1 happen next, all the rules with media query 2 happen after that, and so on and so forth. This is sort of a modest requirement. It's required only for utilities, and it really only applies in some instances to help utility styles cascade properly. If you don't use media query packing, you might find, for instance, that in some cases, media queries that are targeted at a specific breakpoint might not override the media query that is targeted at an earlier breakpoint. So if you're using utilities, and particularly if you're using utilities that are targeted at specific breakpoints, you're going to need to use media query packing in your Gulp workflow. We use a admittedly no longer maintained package called CSS MQ Packer, and we are working to get to one that is actually maintained now that we can use in the long term. So those are the requirements that you need when you're compiling the code. And so Gulp uses the SAS compiler to convert SAS into browser-readable CSS. And when compiling the design system code from SAS, there are kind of like three things that the code needs to actually compile properly. The first thing it needs to import is it needs to import your settings. It needs the settings to come first, so the settings can tell USWDS how to output the code at all. So it can tell it what your definitions are for primary color, what your definitions are for font sizes, etc., and font families. You need to set up your settings and have those loaded first. Second, it needs to load the actual design system source. And then third, you would add any overrides or custom codes that would custom code that modifies what the design system provides by default, and adding any custom styles. So get your settings. Your settings tell design system how to generate it. The Gulp process will generate the CSS, and then it will go through afterwards and tack on at the end anything that you're overriding, and all of your custom stuff at the end. We can see it a little bit on the page here, and we'll look at it in a little bit more depth in a second. But this is what it looks like in SAS, that you're importing all of your theme settings, you're importing USWDS, and you're importing any custom overrides or code. We provide this, we call this, this is like an entry point file that the compiler is looking for to tell it like what to do. We provide this, this directory and this file called styles.scss in this scss.theme directory in the package. But Dan, you just said not to modify any of the files in node modules. Like, you're not going to go into node modules and like edit this stuff in here, and then you import USWDS again, and it all gets creamed. So what do you do? There are some things that you need to copy out of the node package after you install it with node modules. And one of those things is you need to copy out this theme settings directory. So in the dist, like SCSS theme directory are all of your theme settings files and this SAS entry point. You want to put that somewhere in your project file so that your gulp process so you can change your settings, one, and your gulp process knows where to look to have an entry point for compiling the source. And at least for the purposes of this demo, you want to grab your USWDS JavaScript out of the distribution package and place it somewhere in your project directory, someplace like assets/JS, or something like that. And then you want to actually put it into whatever templating system you have, so that it's including that JS at the end of the body, before the close tag of the body element. So these are kind of a lot of requirements, and there are a lot of stuff that you need to set up gulp to do, and blah blah blah. Look for this, look for that, and that's kind of the way. That's why we developed this thing called USWDS gulp, and USWDS gulp is sort of a way to install this gulp workflow into your project and have it sort of automatically set up to process the design system files. And if you go to GitHub, USWDS gulp, this is where it lives. This is where we've documented how to use it. There are a couple installation setup steps, and I'm just going to copy and paste this into my project here, because I want to add this gulp workflow into my Jekyll project. And so I'm just going to dump this in right now. Node is going to do its thing. It's going to copy all of the files from npm and from GitHub and place them in my project's node modules directory. So right now I don't have. This is a project that does not already have a gulp file associated with it. If you have a gulp file already in your project, the directions will be a little bit different. You'll want to try to integrate what we have in the USWDS gulp file into your existing gulp file, which may or may not be a little tricky depending on how you have it set up. But for our purposes right now, I have no gulp file set up. I just wrote some CSS to get going. So I am going to, all right, I've installed. This has come back and it has installed what I wanted to do over here. We're going to come back here and we're going to add this gulp file over into my project. Beep, bop, boop. All right, so now I have a gulp file. And if I go over into my project here, I can see, here's my web page. Here is, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to use this one. Sorry about that. We want to do that. I'll get rid of this. Use that one. All right. So I've copied a gulp file in. The gulp file is essentially telling gulp what to do and where to look. So if we open this gulp file, and this is further documented in here, we gotta go in and tell gulp how to deal with our specific project. So jumping into the gulp file. It's got a bunch of CRUD up here, but it has a few constants described at the beginning. And these are the directories that gulp is either watching, accessing files from, or outputting files to. So the project SAS source directory is where we're going to put our USWDS SAS. That is the settings and like the stuff that we're going to be writing, our custom code, all that stuff. So we're going to put that in a folder called SAS. Gulp is going to put our images, the USWDS images somewhere. We'll put those in assets img. It's going to be putting our USWDS font somewhere. We'll put those in assets font. JavaScript, how about assets JS? Sounds good. The compiled CSS destination, where is our CSS going to live after it's been compiled from SAS? And we'll put that in assets CSS. And this last thing here is site CSS destination, and this is to kind of hack our way around a little bit of a Jekyll quirk, which is sometimes when you change a CSS file, Jekyll is slow or weird to propagate that CSS change up into your actual site. So the site CSS destination is tells Gulp to also write the CSS file into your compiled site. So in site assets.css, that's also where we want it to go as well. So if we're using this, it says also uncomment line 112. And that means to go down here in line 112 and get rid of this little comment so that also, in a sort of hacky way, outputs it into this into the Jekyll directory. Save it up. Head back here to our instructions. And now we're going to initialize the design system on our project using USWDS Gulp. And when we do that, it's going to copy all the USWDS assets over. Those are the images and the fonts and those kinds of things. It's going to create a new directory in our project or add to an existing directory all of the USWDS settings files and the style sheet entry point. And then it's going to compile all of those styles into a new CSS file. And we'll do all that with gulp init. Come back over here into our terminal, gulp init, and if all goes well, it will do some stuff. It's going to copy the setup, copying the fonts, images, JS, and it's going to build that SAS, output it into a directory, and finish up. If we come back over here into our project, now we can see that it has done what it has said it would do. There's this assets folder now. Actually, the assets already existed, but it has added this styles.css in there that it just generated. It's added these design system fonts. It's added the images over here as well. And it has additionally added this this folder that includes all of the settings files and this file, which is the entry point that you might recognize from having just seen a few minutes back. So to recap with the entry point, what it does is it goes in and it imports all of our settings, and then it imports the design system, and then it imports this other file, which we're calling our custom styles. Right now, nothing in it. If we go into some of these other theme settings files, we see all of the ways to set project-specific settings for the design system. We're just sort of one step away from having actually installed the design system, or 2 steps away from it actually installing it on the project. What we still need to do is we need to add a link in the head to the new style sheet that we're compiling. So just grab this this style sheet thing over here. We're going to plop this in here after my other style sheet. We're adding in assets CSS styles.css so that now Jekyll is placing that into the head so that it's going to be read in our document. And then we're going to go back and we're going to put the JavaScript down at the end of the body. So we'll go to one of our layouts, our default layout here. Here's where body ends. I'm going to plop a little link down here at the end of the body to to what we just added to the assets.js directory, which is all of the compiled design system JavaScript. So now we've compiled the CSS. We have added all the assets into our project. We've attached those the appropriate links into our template. Now we can go back and we can start up our Jekyll site again. And come back to our page. And give it a reload. And we have now added the design system to our project. It is doing something. Assets, fonts, source sans process. Because I set up something a little wrong. Let me just change this to fonts. And we could do that. We could set this up doing it a different way, but let's just do it this way all right, now we've got the fonts on there. Everything is well and good, and so now my little site has the design system on it. What does that mean? Well, that means that we could now go over to the design system website. We could go grab a component like the whole header, or for the purposes of this demo, we could just grab the USA banner and grab that USA banner here. Copy it over. Come back into my file here. You know, it's not the world's greatest way to add it to a file, but I can add it in. I can come back over here, and now I have a banner at the top. Good old USWDS banner that is loading properly, that is properly responsive, and it is ready to go. And I could do that same thing if I wanted to add, say, the footer to the bottom of the page. Wanted to add the USWDS footer. And why don't we just do that? And there's the footer. We'll grab the code over here. I know that it sucks to copy and paste code off a website. We're working on that. Here's our page. Just blop this footer down at the bottom. Come back over here, and voila! Now we have the USWDS footer on our page. And we also have access to all of the other sort of features of the design system in our code. So if I want to then take what I had here and wrap it all in a grid container, begin to use the design system grid, I could do that too. Let's see how good I am at typing on this MacBook's keyboard. And now it's no longer all it's all screwed up against the side. Now it's nice and aligned. I've got a header. I've got got all my text here, and I can just begin to add other stuff, or to write new code, or to change my settings. So if, for instance, but to do that, I have to now I have to begin to recompile every time I change the settings. And the final step here is to set up a process in your terminal that tells Gulp to watch this styles.scss and to watch any changes in these settings. And if something changes, to recompile. And you do that by going back over here into the terminal, adding the gulp watch in here. It's going to do its thing. It's going to build. And then anytime we change it again, it will go through and recompile, and we should see the changes on our site. So some things that we could do, we could change the font. So if we scroll down to where we're up, so sans serif, if we want to change that to something like, let's just say we want to change it to public sans, we could do that. Save, turn that into public sans. Say we want to come back over here into some custom styles. We could do something like body. Let's add a background color. Let's do it in a silly way by doing the mix-in, the utility mix-in. Let's make the background color primary lighter. And gulp is going to do its thing. We will see that I spelled it incorrectly, so it sent me a helpful message that I don't know how to spell correctly. Thank you for that helpful message. It's going to do it again with the proper token. I come back, and I've changed it to public sans. I've given it a primary lighter token assigned to the background, and I can begin to do more stuff with the design system. I can begin to use any of the design system components by plopping them into my template. I can begin to use any of the utilities. I can use all of the tokens. I can just begin building using the design system on my site. Now, one additional thing to show here is that we can begin to show packages. So if I come back and I look at this styles.scss here, I'm currently importing all of the design system into this compiled package. Maybe I just want to add the banner and the footer because those are the ones that I have. So per the documentation, there are a couple things that you import to use packages. There's a required set of things. There's a sort of global set of styles that all components use. And then we'll add our USA banner, and we'll add our USA footer as well. And if we come back here, we'll see not only did it work, it compiled at the very least, but it also compiled in less than half of the time. And if we went through the process of actually looking at the size of the output, it would be significantly smaller. And come back here, reload, and nothing has changed because it's still loading the banner, still loading the footer, it's still responsive and all that, and all the stuff that we expect from the design system, but it's using significantly less code, and it's compiling a lot faster. So that's the kind of thing that you could do to optimize once you have installed the system and you're trying to just make it perform that much better. So that's how you begin to add the design system to a project using npm and using USWDS gulp. We also have something called USWDS Sandbox, which is sort of a kind of a pre-built Jekyll installation that uses USWDS gulp. So if you want to just play around with the design system using Jekyll and USWDS gulp, check out USWDS Sandbox because that packages all of that in one sort of easy to install thing, and that can get you up and running for at least a design or sort of prototyping environment super fast. And you know, there's plenty that I could do now to make this a better website. And those are all things that you can do in the context of the design system once you've got it all in there and got it all going. You can change all kinds of things, but the important thing is this is how you add the design system. This is how you can modify its settings. You can change the packages that it installs and sort of relatively easily plug it into an existing site. Do just a small thing like add the official website banner or the footer and begin to get on with your life. So that is what I had planned to demo. And I think now, if possible, I can stop my share and we can open it up to any kinds of questions, whether those are questions you want to ask by unmuting yourself and asking, or questions that I will now grab out of the chat. I'm going to start by looking at the chat, but if anyone wants to jump in and add their own 2 cents, give me a second after I look through the chat. Thank you. Do we worry about the 134 high vulnerabilities noted there? The short answer is no. The longer answer is that is the kind of thing that you see when installing packages through Node. You see a lot of that stuff. Luckily, in the way that we tend to build things, like all of this stuff is focused in the build process, and like when the actual code is there, like the code is just a static file, and it's not really subject to really sort of hacking vectors. So yes, there are vulns. Yes, we are slowly working to patch and fix those that we should, just because it's not great to have vulns. But in general, we don't need to be concerned that they exist there in a really serious way. Is there anything? Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. Is there anything to watch out for when putting a USWDS site up into GitHub pages? I don't think there. Well, yes. There might be some tricky bits involved with just how GitHub Pages is processing your SaaS. There might be some concerns about the way it processes the SaaS, and it's possibly something where you might want to process the SaaS locally and have an output and have and upload that CSS file directly to GitHub. I think we'd have to look at it some more. There's a good likelihood it would work, just as there's maybe an equally good likelihood that something would get kind of messed up in the process. We should look at it. All right, I've gone through everything that's in the chat. If anyone wants to jump in, unmute themselves, and ask any question directly, I'm more than happy to answer them.
I have a question for you, Dan.
Hey, Brian.
So when you were setting up your Gulp SaaS stuff, and for the directory, setting your fonts and image directories, and because you didn't do like fonts and it was just font, is there a way to have or is that a feature that could be added to the USWDS Gulp to update the settings file for the path that you put in there, so that you don't have to set it there and then go into the settings file and change it for fonts or images?
Maybe. So to back up a little bit, like when we saw that the fonts weren't loading, that was because the USWDS CSS was looking in the wrong directory. It wasn't looking in the directory where I actually copied the fonts. You can change this by updating your settings to tell it what directory to look in to look for the fonts. The question is kind of, is there something we could or should build into USWDS Gulp that would look at the constant that we set in that Gulp file and like automatically write it into the settings? Maybe. I think that could be useful. It would certainly save a step, and it would prevent this kind of error that we saw in the demo. I don't necessarily see any reason why that wouldn't be a good idea, other than just trying to minimize the amount that gulp is going in and modifying files sort of by surprise. But otherwise, I think I would be open to I'd be open to a cool pull request that would do that. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I will, let me take the opportunity to see if I can bring up some of our various how to connect with the design system links. And we'll do that by jumping back in here. We are having the Q&A right now. And now here are the ways that you can ask questions of me or anyone else in the community. One of the best ways is in the USWDS public Slack channel. If you're not already in that and you have access to Slack, that's something you can get by going to chat.18f.gov. Will allow you to sort of apply to get into this Slack, and everyone is accepted, I think. You can also subscribe to our as yet not really super active listserv. The best way also to get in touch to ask questions and really see what's happening in the code is to look at USWDS on GitHub. We've had a lot of good issues and pull requests that continue to come in that improve the state of the system, either by pointing out things that aren't working or by indicating places where there could be improved functionality, as Brian says, like possibly something like that in the gulp file could be an improvement. A lot of what we saw in the package development for USWDS 2.1.0 came from an outside pull request that was working toward that solution as well. And of course, also designsystem.digital.gov, we are sort of constantly working to improve the documentation there and to give designers and developers the tools they need through the docs to get going with the design system as quickly as possible. We know who wants to read the docs. We're going to try to make it so that it works well without reading the docs, but want to keep the docs there and as good as possible for when you inevitably need to check them out. Any other questions while we're all still here together? Otherwise, I'm happy not to just sit around and stare at you for 15 minutes.
I can ask another question if nobody else.
Sure, go ahead.
As far as the color palette goes, in this version that is version 2, like the major release, are there any plans to add colors or change any colors, or are those going to be stable until you go to another major version?
There are no immediate plans to change those colors, though the one thing that I was looking at was I was beginning to look at what I could find from the official State Department guidance around what the official colors of the US flag are. And I thought that there was potentially an opportunity to modify some of our system color tokens to hit the specific values of the colors of the US flag. That said, I began to run into some discrepancies around what the official colors of the US flag were, so I kind of lost the thread a little bit. Those were some that I was looking on pursuing. I'm kind of, there might be the occasion to add some vivid variants. We probably won't be adding any like additional steps into the scale. So like we're not going to be adding red warm 25 or something like that. I don't think that that's in the cards, but I think I'm open to to fielding issues or requests for modification of tokens that exist within the current rubric. So if we're looking at, let's just say, red cool 40, and someone's like, I wish it were like a slightly different hex, and there's like a good reason to do it, and it still follows all the same rules, like it is similarly accessible with magic number, then I'm open to that. I think part of that token system is that we want to be able to make small adjustments as long as everything continues to work within like sort of the overall, everything works within the overall rubric.
Hey, this is Anna Monroe. I have a question about support for images in the layouts. So I'm a designer with the lab at OPM. Where we are developing like a variety of guidance around how to do design in the federal space. Not specifically digital design, we leave that to you all, but in a broader sense. And
Cool.
one of our, yeah, it's very fun. We link to you a lot. One of our core values, or one of my core values, is to show as much and tell as little as possible. So we have a lot of like illustration assets, a lot of GIF assets that we like to use, and we're running into a lot of limitations regarding the grid containers that are currently set up in the USWDS. There's like a very distinct skew towards like a short form informational layout, which is totally cool and very applicable in many situations. But we're interested in kind of expanding maybe the definition of what it is to be an image or an illustration in the USWDS, looking at inspirations like the New York Times Magazine or the Atlantic, anyone where you kind of see these wonderful, robust illustrations and things like that, while staying, of course, in 508 compliance. So I was wondering if you all were looking at all in expanding the template support for assets like that, or if it's just like not on the roadmap at all.
So the short answer is it's not on the roadmap. It's not on the roadmap. The things that are on the roadmap are focused on growing some of the most needed components and a couple other kind of things around a submissions workflow and some other like kind of nitty-gritty stuff. That said, I totally agree that at least as far as any kind of pre-built templates that we provide, like we have two templates, and like they're great for a simple docs site, as you say, but they're really not they're not going to do it for anything more complex. I think that there's also a lot of work that we could be doing around images in a lot of ways. I don't think we provide very good support for how we might even think about responsive images or how we package things together in a better in a figure or something. But there's a lot of work that we could do with images, and there's certainly a lot of work that we could be doing to provide different or more modular templates to provide better, more interesting layout options. So that said, it's not on the roadmap. But what is on the roadmap is like the submissions pipeline for adding things back into the system that you might have developed at an interesting government-focused lab that could be applicable. So I would be interested moving forward in, if you have solutions that you're beginning to develop that could work with the design system, like how could we begin to take something that you're thinking about and build it into a new component or a new template or something like that?
That would be awesome. I'll reach out to you maybe and can start sharing what we've developed. Just for clarity, in case you don't know, we're actually a federal government group. We're not government focused. We're feds. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was trying to just be intentionally vague.
Okay, cool. I'll that would be awesome. It would be great to start talking, like know where that pipeline is and contribute back to the system, because we have so many overlaps in our work, but we are running into like some considerable roadblocks when it comes to a more a wider variety of informational channels than short form text. So.
Yeah, I hear you, and I would love to talk more about what you're seeing and where you're finding issues. Thank you. Anyone else have anything on their mind? Give you 10 hot seconds to jump in here before we just begin to bid you adieu. All right. Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.